Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Engine Room podcast. Today we have once again more World Cup content for you guys, and we have Diego Montalban. Diego, ¿cómo estás?
Hey, what's going on? ¿Qué tal, mi gente? As we said, we wanted to bring you the content for every single nation before the World Cup. So today we are joined by a good friend, good guest to talk about Ecuador, Jaime Macias. Jaime, how's it going, man?
How you doing, guys? Pleasure talking to you as always. We're just around the corner for the World Cup to start.
Just a couple of days.
100%.
Look, as I told everyone else that we've been able to interview, I want to say congratulations because your country has made it to the World Cup. So that's great. You know, their fourth World Cup appearance, their best appearance being in 2006 when they reached the round of 16, correct? What is different about this time?
The new generation. We're probably going to be one of the youngest team in the World Cup. We were the youngest team in South America. We're probably going to be the youngest team in the World Cup, and we have goalkeepers that are over 33. We have our main striker that it's around 30 something. So that gives you a context on how young the other 9 players on the pitch are. We have, like, everybody talks about that under 20 World Cup in 2019, where Ecuador finished third, and probably our best player, Moises Caicedo, he wasn't even part of that team because he's younger than those guys. So he just turned 21 this season. So we are a very, very young team, and that's I think that's the biggest difference. Ecuador have never qualified to a World Cup with a generation that you can say, okay, this is a generation that is not going to take us only to this World Cup, that's going to probably take us to other World Cups. And if you add that the next World Cup is going to have 48 spots, well, it's looking good.
So I wanted to ask you personally, what are people saying about this generation? Of course, I was going to bring it up about the under 20 World Cup, under 19 World Cup that you finished third, and yes, how perhaps has Ecuador changed a little bit in their development? We know personally, people know me and Diego are from Peru, and that's a particular area of struggle that, for instance, we go with, and maybe other CONMEBOL teams do. So what have Ecuador done particularly so good when it comes to their player development? And I just got to say, what are people saying? What's the buzz about this? You mentioned a little bit of how this is like a project for a new golden generation, right?
Well, there is one obvious elephant on the room, that it's Independiente del Valle, the team that have won 2 Copas Sudamericanas, and that it's a project that is built from the bottom to the top, that they develop players before fighting for championships. And we have been talking about Independiente del Valle for a long time, and the first last year was their first local league tournament. So what is happening in South America is that, like, you go to Europe and you have the big teams are also the teams that have the best development programs. Like Ajax is a top team in the Netherlands, and they also have a great talent development projects. Real Madrid, Barcelona. What's happening in South America is that the big teams are buying players, and the new teams are developing players. If you see where these Ecuador national team players, especially the younger ones, like the from 27 down, where they start their careers, where they play in the youth leagues, Independiente del Valle, Universidad Católica, some of them Aucas, which just won the tournament this weekend for the first time in history, but it's a historic team, but never been a team that is fighting for the top spot. So basically that's what's happening. And if you go to Colombia is kind of the same thing. Like, you have a lot of players, like, for example, James Rodriguez, he came out from Envigado. And Envigado is kind of an Independiente del Valle. You go to Uruguay, and you have a lot of players that are coming from Liverpool, Montevideo Wanderers, which are historic teams, but never been top 5 teams. So that's kind of what's happening. And in Argentina, it's a little bit different because the top teams are still developing the players, but they have a lot of players that have been loaned to Defensa y Justicia, to Lanús, to those teams. So for example, Ezequiel Palacios, the player who's playing Benfica. Well, statistically, he is an ex-River player, and he plays some games in River. But he just had like the big exposure playing with Defensa y Justicia on a loan. So Defensa y Justicia is that kind of teams. I did an infographic a couple of days ago I think it was last year, on how these developing players teams had been successful in Copa Sudamericana, for example. And you have Independiente del Valle, you have Defensa y Justicia, Bragantinos, that is the Red Bull team from Brazil, Atlético Paranaense, which is kind of that same structure. This year they played the Copa Libertadores final, but like the way players have been developed in South America has changed. It's not the big teams developing players for them. It's the new teams and not so known teams developing players to export them to the European leagues.
Mm-hmm.
Now, La Tria, they're in Group A, right? So
yes.
They start off this weekend alongside Qatar, Netherlands, and Senegal. How do you feel about that group?
I think that it's a very hard group. Like people in Ecuador celebrated when we were drawn in the same group as Qatar and said, hey guys, this is the Asian champion, this is the African champion, and this is the team that had played the most finals without winning the World Cup. So it's a very, very tough group. Then when the calendar came out, there's a statistic. The host team had never lost their first game. Never. The host team have never lost the first game. So that's a statement. And we have great teams playing, great team being hostess, and weak team being hostess. Like that's something that you cannot take for granted. And I feel that people it's aware of how their team is getting to the World Cup, but they're not that aware on how the other teams are getting to the World Cup. And I think that Senegal is one of the best African teams I've ever seen, because African teams have always had great players, but this is a team that had great players in every single line of the field. Yeah. So I've been talking like people say, I think Senegal is going to win the group. I think Senegal is going to win that group, and people get a little bit surprised, but I really think Senegal is the one that's going to win that group.
Wow.
What do you think? What do you think are the chances of making out of that group if you had to grade it 1 through 10?
5. I'm going to publish something. Probably it's going to be published after you release the show or before, which is what will the 32 countries consider doing a good World Cup, right? Mm-hmm. What's doing a good World Cup for every single of the 32 teams? And I think that if Ecuador wins one game, they have done a good World Cup. If winning one game is enough to advance to the next stage, well, it's going to depend on other results, right? But if Ecuador wins one game, you cannot consider the World Cup a failure, even though you probably are not going to advance just with one win.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And with that, what would you say is the most important game? Would you say it's that initial opening game where Ecuador have to really try and get the 3 points?
Yes, because you're starting with the weakest team on the group. Even Qatar is the Asian champion, and I'm telling you that I think that Senegal is going to win the group. Mm-hmm. Well, that's probably the team that everybody's going to get points out of. Talking about style on style of play, the Netherlands is going to be the team that is going to suit the most to what Ecuador plays and how Ecuador plays and how they feel comfortable in the game, but it's not going to be enough. Like what I mean is this is soccer. You can dominate. You can dominate the Netherlands and lost, and you can struggle against Senegal and win. So it's going to be close. But like when I'm like talking about big picture, not score predictions on which team against which team Ecuador is going to feel more comfortable, I think it's going to be the Netherlands.
And you said a little bit about the style of play. So could you tell the audience maybe what is it that Ecuador can bring to the table for someone maybe that don't know too much about the team?
Ecuador is a team that it's very different from the other 3 World Cup teams. It is a team that can dominate from the middle of the pitch, but it's a team that like playing closer to their goal. So that style is going to give the opposition the possession. So this is a team that is going to be very, very, very dangerous on transition, very vertical on transition. but it's not going to suffer without the possession, at least against a team that is not physical strong. We are used in South America, we at Colombia and Venezuela, we are used on being the strongest teams physically. So all the divide balls, all the loose balls, usually we're winning it. And when you go up against Senegal, that's something that disappears. And that's why Ecuador has focused so much on playing against African teams and Asian teams in this friendly and not against European teams. And it's kind of, well, we know what we can do against European. It's better if they don't see us until they face us. Ecuador haven't faced an European team since they were eliminated from the 2014 World Cup. Well, but they have tried to play as much games against African and physical teams to know what they are going to be exposed when they face Senegal. So they played Cape Verde, they play against Nigeria, and then they play against Iraq, which I always, and I was talking this about the USA, like Asia is so big that Iraq, even though they compete in Asia, looks more like an Eastern European team, an ex-Soviet Union team, that an Asian team, if we consider an Asian team more of the Pacific Coast teams, the Korean and the Japans. So Asia is very interesting because you have very different styles very different styles. And even, for example, Qatar has a lot of African-born players, but are more from this Nordic part of Africa, not the other coast, not the coast of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Now, in the Commonwealth qualifiers, Ecuador started off hot. They stayed in the top half, but towards the second half, we saw them get more ties. You know, they tied a little bit more, and even over the last year, the games that you were mentioning, the friendlies, they tied a lot. Is that worrying?
Yes, but it's not surprising. Like I really feel surprised when people is surprised that we're not scoring goals, because I got a stat. I think it was 12 out of 16 games where we scored goals. Yeah, the goals came from set pieces from our center backs and our midfielders. I think our strikers scored the first goal of the game 4 times. 2 of them were penalties. One was against Bolivia, playing in Guayaquil, not in Quito, and the other one was the one against Peru in the 1-1 in Lima. So there was other thing that was surprising. I think it was Athletic who published that Ecuador is a more powerful team on set pieces on this World Cup. And if you have set pieces prepared, you're not going to use them on the friendlies, right? So that's something that I'm really thinking on the World Cup. But it's, if your strikers are not scoring, you gotta find a way around it, and you're gonna play those cards on the official games, not on the friendlies. So yeah, kind of that. I think also that there was a false image on how powerful Ecuador was, because we faced at the beginning of the qualifier probably the worst Colombia. Queiroz was fired after they faced Ecuador, and Uruguay. It was probably Uruguay was very erratic during the qualifiers, and that 4-2 game in Quito was how much of this was Ecuador and how much of this was Uruguay not being competitive.
Do you think that the Byron Castillo case affected at all the team coming into this World Cup?
I think so. Because man, you're losing a teammate that was part of the process in the last date, 5 days away from the World Cup debut. I'm sure it's going to have an impact on the psychology of the team. Then there are things we don't know, who do the players think it's responsible for this? Like they think that their federation or the coach could do more, and that's going to break their relationship, or they think that it's Peru or Chile responsibility, and they're going to go and give it everything because of something they believe is unfair. We don't know. Like I think it's going to have an impact, but depending on what exactly happened and how it happened and how they process it, it could be a positive impact or a negative impact.
And now bringing it back to football, we're talking about those impacts. What would you think would be a player or particularly, and you mentioned a little bit about set pieces, something that Ecuador can surprise, one area perhaps that opponents should be looking out for? What do people need to know about that area of Ecuador?
Ecuador changed their system after the qualifiers. Ecuador usually play 4-4-2 away, 4-2-3-1 at home. Ecuador was a very sitting back team away, and at home, without players adapted to the altitude, I think that Ecuador suffered the altitude more than what Ecuador opponents suffered. So you cannot press high in the altitude during 90 minutes. So Ecuador have like this ladder system of having different, like, not clear lines, but different like if you see the picture for Ecuador from up top, it was like 5 or 6 lines. So that's why they played that system. Ecuador is going to play 4-3-3 in the World Cup, as they have been playing on the qualifiers. And the key name in that system is José Cifuentes. José Cifuentes almost have no participation during the qualifiers because his position didn't exist, because he came as the third midfielder. But he makes long runs starting from close to the center backs and finishing in the box with the striker. So that's a guy that I think is going to have an impact in Ecuador. I think that's probably the guy that people is going to say, man, he really surprised us on the World Cup. Because, for example, you had Moises Caicedo, and we all know Moises Caicedo, and everybody expected him to do good. And if he does good, well, that's what everybody expected, right? But Cifuentes, I think it's somebody that people not having him on the radar as somebody that can have an impact on the team.
If you were Gustavo Alfaro today, what would be your starting 11 against Qatar?
I think there's not much mystery. Well, the keeper is a mystery. I think Galíndez is a better goalkeeper than Dominguez. Then it should be Preciado, Arboleda, Hincapié, and Estupiñán. Grueso, Caicedo, Moisés Caicedo, and Cifuentes, Ener Valencia, Ángel Mena, and Michael Estrada.
That's a solid team, to be honest with you, I think.
Yeah, I think that Ecuador has a lot of players that can have an impact from the bench. But for some people love Plata. I really think that he's more a highlight player than a prolific player during 90 minutes. I don't think he understands the game. He's capable of, one-on-one, leaving anybody sitting on the floor. But he's more a player that can solve your problem if you're not winning the game, if you're losing the game. But when you need to manage, I think his decision making is not that great. I think Ángel Mena is great. Man, I'm so happy for him to be in the World Cup. He was my teammate. And to get the chance to play the World Cup at the age of 34, for me, is amazing. I'm so happy for him. But sadly, in the change of the system, I think that he is the one that is going to lose his position, because without Ecuador playing with a number 10 or with 2 strikers and 4 midfielders, his position is the one that disappeared for Cifuentes to come in. So, but for example, if you are winning the game, Mena should come in. He is going to control the timing of the game. He's going to organize everything, and that's like he's the opposite of Plata. His decision making best on the squad.
So I guess to wrap this up, I just wanted to ask you, Jaime, what is the one thing that you could say gets you a little bit nervous when you go to sleep thinking about this World Cup? What's the one thing you still believe maybe Ecuador could tune to try and I don't know, make the best performance possible in Qatar? Is there anything at all, or do you have one thing that perhaps stands out?
I think that the overthinking of the situations since Ecuador qualify until it makes its debut, it's their worst enemy. I have a good relationship with Luis Suarez, Costa Rica coach, and I've quoted this in every single interview I've done to the World Cup, and he's going to play his third World Cup, and we have talked a lot about how different his approach has been to the different World Cups, and one of the things he told me and my co-host in our podcast, Fútbol Infinito, was that when he qualified for his first World Cup, he went and visited different coaches who had managed in World Cups, and like one of the basic question he was asking them is what should I expect now? Like, how do I live from now until we make our debut? And he always remembered that he talked with Alfio Basile, Argentinian coach, and Basile told him like every doubt you're going to be full of doubts, and the team is not going to perform as you want him to perform, and everything you want to change, you are wrong. Don't do it, because everybody is anxious trying to find solutions to problems that does not exist, and the players will always be thinking that if they give 100%, they are going to miss the World Cup, so their performance is not going to be good. So keep calm, don't touch anything, and believe in what you have done through the path. Don't change anything. And seeing how Ecuador had been managed since the qualifiers through the friendlies, and now I feel that it had been overmanaged. That I think that too many players have come in and out from the squad, too much noise around who is being called and who's not being called. And I don't think, like, man, I don't think you should make a big deal for who is the 26th or the 25th players. Mm-hmm. I think that the guy who should be the 25th or the 26th player is a guy that was in all the process and probably now is struggling. Well, he deserves to be in that spot, because 95% out of 100, you're not going to use it. But he deserves to be in that position. So I feel that Ecuador is arriving to the World Cup a little bit over management. And I cannot criticize the coach, because I know I'm quoting a conversation from a guy that has managed 3 World Cups, but this is his first World Cup, and everybody approaches the scenarios in different ways and take decisions in different ways. At the end, the job of a coach is taking decisions. They can be good or right or wrong, but their job is taking decisions.
Man,
that's amazing.
That was an amazing quote, to be honest. I think we've learned so much about Ecuador today. I don't know, Buga, if you have anything else to close with.
No, not really. You give it the close, Diego. You give it the close today.
Yeah. Jaime, if you want to let the people know where they can find you and they can follow you, obviously you're going to be in Qatar, so they should follow you closely, because you obviously have a lot of insight.
Well, our podcast, our little space, is called Fútbol Infinito. We are in Twitter and we're in YouTube and the different audio platforms, and we're expecting to be talking some nonsense every round, trying to explain things that don't deserve any explanation, that are very obvious, but we're going to talk about it.
I love it. It's the best. I mean, that's what we got, right? So Listen, I want to thank you, Jaime. I want to thank you, Buga. I want to thank everybody that's going to be watching this and learning from this, because there's a lot to dissect and learn here. So thank you all from the engine room. This is just one out of the 32 nations. So please stay tuned, like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you soon.
Ciao, ciao.